Welcome to Out and Perceived Empathy, created by me, Adrian Martinez, a film and culture and general psychology research project gathered for the first year learning conference of spring 2019. For my study, I have decided to use the ending scene from the 2017 horror film Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele, as the main focus of my study on race and empathy. The clip itself being about 5 minutes and 30 seconds long. The scene, as a result, was a very big roller coaster of emotions, especially as we watched the cop car, or what we believe is the cop car, but is in fact a TSA car driven by his best friend, Rod. This is because most people in the room can read the scene or interpret when we see the car, especially with correlations of police brutality and how black men are far more likely to be incarcerated and jailed for minor offenses compared to their white counterparts who do the same acts. We interpret this scene as very negative at first, and we feel almost like pity or fear for the character. And then, of course, that trope is subverted onto our heads, and we have that relaxation moment until the end, and we begin realizing, well, they may be safe, but for how long? This leads to the research question. Do white students viewing a scene from a movie about racial dynamics from the perspective of the marginalized community feel emotions or empathy for the characters or storyline, as would a person of color viewing the same film? When reviewing the research, a very interesting study was done by the University of Bologna in Italy in 2010. In the study, they had 40 white participants look at a clip where a white hand was stabbed with a knife, and then in the very next scene, a black hand was stabbed with a knife. They put them on EKG reading, I believe it was, and they checked their brain waves to see what parts of the brain associated with anxiety were being amped up during which clip. And in all the participants, their EKG readings went up drastically when viewing the white hand being stabbed compared to the black hand. According to film historian Bill Nichols, when talking about race and ethnicity, so that racism may be at work in another way in the convention that white actors represent universal human values, whereas ethnic minority actors, if their race comes into play, represent stereotypes. And he calls this concept whiteness. Whiteness, specifically a non-denominational but generally Protestant version of whiteness, comes to represent the universal reference point against which other ethnicities are made to appear amusing, sinister, untrustworthy, or otherwise lacking. Perhaps another way of looking at this, whenever a person sees constantly white actors in their roles, and whenever they see a non-white character playing a role where their character is defined by their race, it also gives us an understanding to an extent of semiotics, which is the communication of symbols within a culture. And within the US, there are many different cultures and ethnic groups within our one country. And of course, within these cultures and subcultures, there are different symbols and signs that each of them use that to another person wouldn't be known, basically. In conclusion, this leads to my hypothesis that if white students view this particular scene, then they might not view it with the same level of heightened emotions as what a person of color would when viewing the same scene, because they come from a background not familiar from the characters and haven't lived in their racialized situations. They may feel sympathy but not empathy to the extent as with a person of color as a result. The sample participants for this research project were white and people of color students at TMUCC. People of color can include Black, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Middle Eastern, Native American, and mixed race people. Gender was also noted along with race, as I believe that the intersectionality of this could possibly give us an interesting result too. But gender wasn't taken into as much consideration as when looking at race in the data. To do this project, I created a survey using Qualtrics. It was distributed among friends, coworkers, and classmates here at TMUCC. Questions include multiple choice questions, such as whether you believe Rose, a white woman, deserved to got shot. Text entry questions, such as whether you found her costume alarming or not. And Likert scale questions, such as I felt most anxious, in particular watching the cop car pull up, from strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree. For the results, the demographics that answered the most were Hispanics, followed by white, and then black, and then Asian. And interestingly enough, we had more females than males respond to the survey. However, no significant findings were actually found when comparing race or gender, as we thought there might have been. Of the 35 participants, only 24 had actually seen the movie in its full entirety. Black and Hispanic audiences were more likely to see the film than white audiences in its entirety. And through this, we found that people who have seen the film in its entirety were more likely to feel anxious, fearful, or scared than audiences who hadn't seen the film entirely. So this could show us or give some context that when viewing a film, especially a pivotal moment that does have heightened emotions for the participants watching the film, is that context matters when watching a movie. You're just going to watch 5 random minutes of some film with there being like a plot twist or a big character development. You may not exactly feel for those characters or the situations compared to you have context from watching the movie in its entirety, and you get to grow the characters and the storyline. Being that this is a horror film, we wanted to see how audiences' emotions of fear and anxiety were felt while watching the scene, especially when the cop car pulls up. As many respondents, when asked about how they felt about watching the car pull up, many believed that Chris was going to either be arrested, killed by the previous police officer in the film, or had mental flashbacks to previous cases of police brutality. This was actually common among respondents of different races and ethnicities. When asked about fear or anxiety, audiences felt more shocked at the sight of the car, in particular during the scene. This goes back to the discussion of semiotics in film, as I believe that white audiences wouldn't feel as frightened by this particular symbol as would a person of color respondent. However, the data of the response ethnicities and races on agreedness with anxiety was actually mixed, with white respondents only having more fear and anxiety with the scene and its components, just a tad more than black respondents, followed by Hispanic respondents. Which is interesting since Hispanics reported to having more police encounters, and negative ones for that matter, than the other respondents. Yet, when asked about fear of the possibility of the police, they were more mixed. Hispanics also claimed to be more alarmed by Rose's outfit, which director Jordan Peele said was actually reminiscent of white African colonial hunters. However, since very few people reported to being alarmed at her outfit, the role of ethnicity wasn't a significant indicator. However, the people that were alarmed by her outfit were able to identify its resemblance to African hunters and the meticulous use of art direction within the scene. Due to the diminishment of the racial category in participants' answers, it showed the limitations of the project, and that there simply just weren't that many participants to make a big impact to begin with. Just because the survey was widely distributed doesn't guarantee that people will actually take it. However, because race in audience responses was constantly mixed or insignificant, it actually helped show us the positive findings through this. In conclusion, we found that white participants were actually able to empathize with the character and storyline, as do most people of color watching the film. Despite the film and the clip's use of many symbols, viewers were still able to understand and feel for the character and the storyline despite coming from different backgrounds. Unlike the character, which goes to show the power that film has to transport us into other people's shoes and experience the world through their eyes, despite from whatever background we may be from.